And welcome back to another episode of the Double Doink Podcast. My name is Brian Deeg. Thank you so much for tuning in today, guys. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated. You can also rate the podcast and review the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. It would also be greatly appreciated. We are talking strictly New York Giants today, and who else but to have on to do so but my man from ESPN. He covers the Giants there. Jordan Raanan is with me. Jordan, my man, how we doing? Is it hot in East Rutherford?
It is hot. It is hot in East Rutherford. It's hot in the Northeast. You know, you go outside, you watch football, you're sweating. But look, I'm not the one in pads, right, and a helmet and running around. I'm just standing there.
So just quickly, just from your personal experience, how's training camp been so far? I love this time of year for beat writers. This is like the perfect, I'm assuming this is probably the best time of year when you're covering a specific team, right? As a beat writer's training camp?
Well, the best time of the year is like the 6 weeks before training camp when the NFL basically shuts down because that's like straight vacation. But
that's true.
Training camp is, training camp is tough because training camp's a grind. It's just nonstop every day, practice back and forth. You know, guys, injuries are there's a lot of injuries, a lot of news, a lot of roster shuffling. So I would say training camp might be the hardest part of actually covering a team. It's the biggest grind. It's the middle of the summer. If you have kids, they're like still not in school yet, and so everything is really hectic.
Okay, so quickly before we're going to jump into training camp and the team, the Giants do play tonight. Do you have any idea how Brian Daboll will handle the starters during the preseason games?
Probably around a quarter, is that he explained it. Like he wants to see they're going to play. They're not going to play a half, the starters, right? But he wants them to play. But he's not just going to say, oh, it's one drive, because if that one drive is 3 out or 3 and out or 4 plays, like he probably wants to get him in more than that. So that's why I say around the quarter. If they had like one good sustained drive, I think that might, be suffice. And that'll take up most of the quarter anyway if an offensive defense. So like a drive or two for the offense probably, or actually the starters, I should say, in general.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, but he's a believer in playing his guys. Like, some teams don't play their guys at all. Like New England doesn't. They're not playing their starters.
Yeah. Brandon Staley and the Chargers doesn't play. I don't think he played their guys.
Doesn't believe in playing their guys at all, right? I think McVay doesn't. Am I right? He doesn't play his guys at all either.
I don't think Kyle Shanahan does. Like I think it's the younger generation that kind of is getting away from it.
Well, Brian Daboll does come from the New England background. You can't forget that. He is.
That's true.
His primary most time has been spent with Bill Belichick, and he also spent time with Nick Saban. So he has a little bit of that old school in him in that regard, I think. But enough for a new school where you see, like, his offense has obviously evolved over the years. It's nothing like what they ran in New England 8 years ago when he was there.
Okay, so speaking of Brian Daboll, I'm really curious about this one because Joe Judge's training camps, I feel like, were pretty entertaining from a non-Giants fan. A lot of crazy stories came out over the 2 years he was there. Might have been overblown, but what's the difference between a Joe Judge training camp and a Brian Daboll training camp? Not specifically scheme-wise, but just how they run their ship in general. What have you noticed the differences?
Yeah, I think Judge definitely ran a harder training camp. I mean, first of all, the way Joe Judge and his coaches coached, like Joe Judge training camp, all you heard was F-bombs, like left and right all over the place. Like they coached hard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Brian Daboll's training camp in general definitely seems a little bit lighter. There's guys taking off left and right, giving, maintenance type days, and it's definitely on the lighter side. And even in the spring, he prioritized keeping guys healthy. So, like, there was so many guys in red jerseys not practicing. There might have been, like, 20 guys on certain days, like, not practicing. 20 out of 90, by the way. So you're talking about, like, a quarter of the team almost not participating. But as we've gone along here, once we started having full contact, full pads, you're starting to see the harder side of Brian Daboll come out. And then we just mentioned he intends to play his guys in the preseason. That's a philosophical thing for him.
So let's stick with the offense and Brian Daboll. I'm assuming all eyes have been on the offense and how different it's looked. That's probably the most intriguing part of this team heading into this year. what have you noticed schematic wise, and has the offense looked more creative than the past years? I don't think it possibly can't be.
Yeah.
It's got to be more creative, right?
Yeah,
Jason Garrett's
we can't go backwards. We can't go in the other direction. I think you're right there. Yeah, the Jason Garrett days.
I'm assuming Giants fans are pretty fired up to not have Jason Garrett offense anymore.
So this is where the Giant fan base and the situation's at. So Brian Daboll, he's running on motion in training camp, guys back and forth, backfield, slot, all around. There's motion. Brian Daboll, I looked it up, in Buffalo, was like a middle of the road motion guy. He's not like this super high motion guy in the front, but like it's such an upgrade from Jason Garrett that everyone's like, oh my God, they're motioning so much. It's like pedestrian for NFL standards nowadays, by the way. But you definitely see a difference in that regard, in regards to what the offense is going to look like and like in the modernization of that. Brendan. Brendan.
Yeah.
The Giants averaged 15 points a game last year. 15.2, I think the number was exactly. Think about how pathetic that is in today's NFL. 15 points per game. So the bar is so low. Everybody just wants to be given optimism, right? Mm-hmm. Give me something that the Giants are going to, be exciting, be able to move the ball, move into the 21st century. Like that's what they're craving for at this point. So I think that's kind of where we're at. And you get it. Like it's a combination of Brian Daboll's offense with, Mike Kafka bringing things that they did in Kansas City. We know those are offenses that can be successful, right? I mean, Kansas City and Buffalo, right? We watched the playoff game. They were scoring left and right. Those offenses were ridiculous. Like those teams can do some stuff. Mm-hmm. So we know this offense can work. Do they have the guys to make it work? That's now the question.
So bringing it back to kind of the fan perspective, I almost felt bad for Giants fans. Like, there was that one series where they like did a quarterback sneak in the end zone last year on was it first, second, and third down? Like it got so ugly there on the offensive side of the ball. Where you're right, it's just got to get better. And then going back to your point, building a offense surrounding Mike Kafka and Brian Daboll is not the worst idea in the world.
Right. I mean, we know that those offenses can be successful in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like nobody's going to object to that at this point. Mm-hmm.
So another thing on the offense that I'm really curious to see is how the wide receiver position plays out, because there's a lot of talent there, but there's not a solidified number one, I'd say, that you can stand out. I think if you talk to maybe 20 different Giant reporters, you'll probably get a bunch of different answers. In your mind, Jordan, who's going to lead this team in targets this year?
It's such a hard question to answer because tell me, what is Kenny Gallaudet? Right, he has been injured now and hasn't done much for the last 2 seasons. Like I'm watching him at practice, the separation is limited.
Yeah, and maybe last year too. There's a website called Reception Perception. I think it was. I was looking at yesterday's receiver stats. He was at the bottom of the league in separation. Like he was just a bad player.
He was a bad player, and it hasn't looked much different this year. Now the only hope that I look at and say, okay, he was injured last year. He got injured a couple times. Right, he had a hamstring injury in training camp, so he came back just before week 1. So by the time he came back week 1, you could tell we knew the way he was running. He was not going to be good. Then he finally seemed to start getting healthy. He had a big game, I think it was the one game everybody had a big game. New Orleans for them. So week 4. So he's finally getting healthier, and then the next week he gets injured again. And so I don't think he was ever right again for the rest of the season. So he played a bunch of games, but he certainly wasn't healthy. And now he missed the spring. He was on the side. So I'm saying, okay, he kind of looks like he did again last year, but he was out in the spring. Maybe he's just getting healthier again. They better hope so, because I can't. It needs to be him. He gets paid $18 million a year, but I have my doubts of whether he is going to be that guy. Now, Kadarius Toney is the guy that I have the most optimism for, right? Like if this guy is on the field, I know he's going to be a beast. Like he is super talented. When he's engaged, when he's on the field and healthy, he's a problem. He's something the other team's going to have to deal with. His thing is, again, he had everything happen to him last year. He even had COVID twice, for God's sakes. This year, he had a procedure in the spring. He's getting days off. throughout training camp already. I saw him grabbing his leg, being stretched out on the side. Didn't practice the other day again. So I have questions about him. If he's healthy, to me, he's their top receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
He's definitely the most talented, right? I got to go to the
Yeah,
group.
there's no doubt right now that he's their most talented guy. He will be the guy that gets the most receptions, that gets the most targets. If they're all in the field together, he's the guy, in my opinion.
I'll even
that probably out targets everyone else. With Wan'Dale Robinson not that far behind, because Sterling Shepard's still coming back from that torn Achilles. He's got a little ways to go. So Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be a big part of this offense. My thinking is that, let's say that everybody's healthy. You're going to see Gallaudet play. The other three guys sort of rotate in constantly. So they each play like 80%, run 80% of the routes, but nobody 100. And so then the targets are spread out a bit. But I think the guy who has the highest likelihood of being the number one target, even though I don't feel confident about it, is Tony.
Yeah, I'll even take it a step further. I think he's one of the, just talent-wise, he's one of the most talented players in the league. He's special with the ball.
I will say this. Yeah. I had somebody from the previous staff tell me that they legitimately think if he could keep his head right and be engaged and work hard and just be there all the time and stay healthy, that he could be the best receiver in the league. He's up there with legitimately, he was talking about putting him in the same category as, the DeAndre Hopkins, Cooper Kupp, all these top receivers that are there in the NFL these days. That's the level that he puts him in, that the coach put him in.
100%. The talent's there. He's special with the ball in his hands. You saw it last year. You can go back, watch his college tape. You can see the talent there. And he's definitely some question marks with route running that can come. But with the ball in his hand, no one moves like him. There's not a lot of guys in the NFL that are shifty like that can break tackles, that can just change lane ways.
Yeah. Go watch that Dallas game last year, and you'll just see what the potential is there for him. The problem is, can he stay healthy? Can he stay, fully engaged? And can they sort of just keep him corralled in there and involved? And I think if they can, otherwise, these kind of things, when you have all these things, there's one of these guys, there's always drama, there's always something. It wears on people, right? So it'll wear on the organization. So I wonder how much, it is a new regime, they didn't draft him, how much the stuff is already wearing on him.
And they took Wan'Dale Robinson, right? Kind of I wouldn't say a similar player, but sort of, right? It's kind of, I wouldn't say a shot at Tony, but it's maybe a little bit of an insurance plan.
They see Tony as someone who could play outside too, though.
Okay.
Absolutely. He plays a lot more outside. Wan'Dale Robinson right now has been almost strictly a slot guy. And they're moving guys around all over the place. That's part of this offense. That's their intention. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. That's what they want to do. So I think in an ideal world, if everybody's healthy, you're going to see these guys moving around, including, by the way, in the backfield, Tony, I'm talking Tony and Wan'Dale Robinson, even Shepard, if he was healthy, those guys, outside slot backfield. You're going to see all those spots for them.
Okay, let's talk about the big guy in the center, Daniel Jones. What's the feel so far at camp? What's your eyes tell you? What are you hearing? What's the fan base thinking of? Just give me all the Daniel Jones talk that you've got over the last couple of weeks.
It's been up and down this summer. There's no way around it. The other day he went 5 for 15 with 2 interceptions. That's a bad day at training camp. But they're installing. It
happens, right?
Yeah, they're installing a new offense. This is kind of par for the course. I tell this story to everybody. Eli Manning was the quarterback. Ben McAdoo comes in. Eli's a 2-time Super Bowl winner at this point. And McAdoo's redoing his footwork, installing a new offense, different than, Eli's basically been in the same system his whole career to start from 04 to 13. Yeah.
That sounds
so you're talking basically 10 years is in the same system.
Yep.
McAdoo comes along, and that training camp was a disaster. Every day, nobody's on the same page. Eli's throwing multiple picks. They look terrible. He ended up having 2 of his best statistical years in 2014 and 2015 with McAdoo as the coordinator. So it's kind of par for the course that you expect. And my bold prediction entering the summer was the Giants defense was going to dominate. And that was partly the reason, because installing a new offensive scheme is a lot harder than installing a new defensive scheme.
Mm-hmm.
With being on the same page and everything, it just looks different. So it's been a struggle a little bit. Now, the Giants are going to give him an opportunity, right? This new regime, the way they think is, okay, we're in an evaluation year. We have a quarterback. He's in his fourth year, the final year of his rookie contract. We didn't pick up his fifth-year option. We'll see how he does. They're going to give him the opportunity to see, okay, we think we improved the offensive line a little bit. I think it's better. We think we have weapons. This is actually the first time in his career he has a chance to play with a healthy Saquon Barkley for an extended period of time. Like that rookie year, Saquon, that wasn't Daniel Jones. So Daniel Jones comes along, doesn't start the first couple games of that second year of Saquon. Saquon ends up getting injured in the middle of that second year and hasn't been healthy really consistently since. So he's never even really played with Saquon, a healthy Saquon. His receivers have been down and out. There's a lot of reasons why he hasn't been good, aside from him. Now, he has to play better, but they're going to take the opportunity to see if he's the guy. Because before they go and they have to figure out a way to get a quarterback and a franchise quarterback and invest all these assets and everything that goes into finding a quarterback that you're basically set with for 10 years. All right, let's see. Maybe it was the situation he was in. We'll give him an opportunity. We'll see how it goes. Maybe we get lucky. Maybe we strike gold. And you know how big a benefit that would be for the organization if that happened?
Yep.
Right? So they'll franchise him or re-sign him in the middle of the year if they have to. Like, those are still options. The fact that they didn't 50-year option was because, hey, we got to see it.
Yeah. Okay. It's funny that you say, like, what a good deal would be. Like, if they did pick up that option, right, and he was good, that fifth-year option would look pretty juicy. But I'm assuming that he
so
would
what? So let's just say Daniel Jones is lights out this year. Yeah. Plays amazing. Like, finally has a good team around him. Goes like 35-10, right? 4,000 yards. And you're like, this guy's the real deal. This is kind of what we saw flashes as they've slapped the franchise tag on him at that point, right? Or you could re-sign him in the middle of the year. Like, the franchise tag is what, $30 million? I mean, quarterback contracts are getting to $50 million now.
Yep.
So $30 million is still not crazy for a quarterback.
Yep. Fair enough.
So that's a fallback option. They'd love to have that problem.
Yeah.
If that's their problem, they're ecstatic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's transfer over to the defensive side of the ball because there's obviously a whole new coaching staff on that side. What are you noticing the difference between Wink Martindale and Patrick Graham? Of course, if you know the way these two guys have run their defenses, Patrick Graham played a lot of too high shell, had quarterbacks to make mistakes. Wink Martindale attacks you.
And zone versus man pressure, significantly more pressure.
More of a different scheme. Could be more of a different scheme if you want one. Like they are different. They are different philosophies. Defensive mind philosophies. Have you noticed that so far in camp?
Oh, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, it stands out to you like a sore thumb. Like, all you see is everybody in the Giants defense. I mean, it even has stood out to me about how aggressive Wink is, right? You figure new offense, he might hold back a little bit. No, they're like every play, there's like 10 guys at the line of scrimmage. You don't know who's coming, who's dropping. And that's what his scheme is. I mean, that's what I was told it was. And it has totally lived up to the hype in every way, shape, or form. Like, there's nickels, safeties, outside cornerbacks. They're all going to be blitzing nonstop. Different guys are going to be dropping. The defensive linemen are going to be moved around in all different spots. So, this is going to be a way more aggressive defense. Here's the question. I think the Giants can have a better pass rush. Kayvon Thibodeau looks really good so far. They have Azeez Ojulari, who had a quality rookie year. Sack numbers were really good. Pressure number wasn't as good. But, you saw 8 sacks as a rookie, you think there's potential. So if you have him and Thibodeau, and they prove to be 2 legit pass rushers, and then you have Leonard Williams, who not a great player, but a very good player. He's a problem in the middle. Teams have to account for him. He's a quality pass rusher also. And they can pressure the quarterback, and he's going to, blitz and use all these exotic, unique looks. I have no doubt they're going to pressure the quarterback. That will help them perhaps hide some of the deficiencies on the back end. Now, the problem with this whole unit is they're super thin everywhere. That's really the whole roster in general. It's very thin. They didn't have money to spend this offseason. Dave Gettleman did a all-time terrible job. Like,
Oh yeah.
You could stack it up there with worst GM jobs in history.
He handcuffed this team. He handcuffed this roster.
Yeah, he's in the conversation. Like, that's how bad the roster is. So depth-wise, any injuries, then it becomes a problem. Like any injuries to the secondary, that blitzing scheme could be in trouble. Like what happened last year in Baltimore when Wink is blitzing left and right, but he has no cornerbacks. And they got shredded. Like, so the Giants need to stay healthy on the back end.
That's one of my questions I was going to ask you. I was taking a look at their cap space. They've got about $6 million this year. They cut James Bradbury to save $10 million. Is this going to be a regret? Like, it seems like that's the guy they should have kept. Like, you know, like, I'm not just saying it because I'm an Eagles guy, but it's
they had to move a lot of money around. This is an evaluation year. They didn't want to compromise 2023. They said, look, we're just going to take it on the chin this year. We're getting rid of a good player. We know that. We're just going to have to take it. We'll play a couple of young guys, right? To have Aaron Robinson, who was a pick last year. Cordell Flott is a young cornerback. Darnay Holmes. Like, let's see what we have in these guys. Next year we'll obviously add to that depth in the secondary, but they know where they are as a friend. And look, I wouldn't criticize it because I'm for these kind of moves because I've been saying forever this team needed to scrap it and start over.
Yeah.
And so that was a move like, they would be better this year with James Bradbury. There's no doubt about it. But really, what is that getting them in the big picture? Right? It'll compromise next year a little bit, take up some of their money. They would have to move money around and a whole bunch of guys this year to make it work. So that's other money than they have moving around that compromises next year also. And they didn't really want to do that.
What is the fan base reaction right now? How does the fans feel? Like what's the it's probably split. It's hard to kind of get like a generic answer out of this, but how do you think the fans are feeling about this Giants team heading into this year?
Well, I can only speak from like my perspective of what I see. And what I see is every 2 years the Giants hire a new coach and everyone gets excited. There's obviously when a coach is
you can't blame them. You can't blame them. Yeah,
I don't blame anybody, but I'm like sort of jaded at this point. But like when a coach is undefeated, everyone's optimistic, and you should be. I'm not saying you shouldn't be. Absolutely. So I think that's where the fan base is. They're optimistic. Okay, we have confidence, even more so than Daboll. To me, they have a GM who's competent now.
Yeah.
Whereas before, like, you just go look at the moves. I mean, you would scratch your. He once stood up there, Dave Gettleman, and said, "Oh, I don't worry about age for running backs." Okay. I mean, if there's a position you need to worry about age for, it's running backs. And he pointed his job.
Any position you need to worry about age. Like, it's just a stupid comment.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an all-time stupid comment. Like, even if you're trying to defend a specific guy, like, that is just such an asinine comment that just states where they were at. But there's so many examples. So to have Joe Shane, I think is a huge upgrade.
Yep.
I mean, just from my basic interactions with him, he just seems competent. He seems like a bright guy. He seems to know what he's doing. And they have a plan. And I kind of like I said before, I kind of agree with the plan that they've installed so far. Okay, we're going to have to take it on the chin this year. We're going to have to get rid of guys we probably want to keep. We're not going to go overspend. We're not going to sign anybody, link ourselves to anybody long term. If you look at their roster right now, name the player. Name the significant player in the Giants that wasn't drafted in the last 2 years. Anybody. Name a guy.
Like that wasn't drafted in the last 2 years?
Yeah.
Kenny Gallaudet, Adoree Jackson. Yeah.
Kenny Gallaudet.
Yeah, I was looking
His
at
contract is basically made so they can get out of it next year.
I was looking at their cap situation for 2023. They've got about $53 million in space, and they've got Adoree Jackson, Kenny Gallaudet. Those are the two big contracts.
Adoree Jackson, Kenny Gallaudet. Did you look at Leonard Williams? Even Leonard Williams basically has to play like Aaron Donald to want to keep him.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he has a $27 million cap hit next year.
Yeah, they've got options. Like
so every one of these guys is in a prove-it year, basically contract year. Like either their contract's actually up or the Giants can just move off their contract. So you're talking about Daniel Jones, the quarterback, Saquon, their top offensive weapon, Kenny Gallaudet, Sterling Shepard, Blake Martinez, Adoree Jackson, Leonard Williams. I mean, just that's like those are like their biggest name players, like all of them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how they're set up. I think that's the right move there. And then if you think with Brandon Beane, who, Joe Shane worked with Brandon Beane, that's kind of what they did in Buffalo, right? Yep. They had an evaluation year. They actually made the playoffs. Tyrod Taylor was their quarterback.
But their cap was a mess. People forget
they
that.
got it in
when
order.
They made the playoffs at that point. Their roster was a disaster.
They got it in order. They got their cap in order that first year.
Yep.
They evaluated everybody. They drafted their quarterback in year 2, and they started building what they have now.
Yep. And they did it. They must have had some of the best free agent years when Joe Schoen would have been there. Like the Bills were impeccable at free agency. They weaponized free agency better than any other team did in the NFL.
They drafted really well in the middle rounds, like guys like Dawson Knox in the 5th round. Like they're just like good players in those middle rounds. They hit on some big guys at the top, the Tre'Davious Whites of the world, who's a stud, Josh Allen, obviously. But yeah, they're just their thing wasn't go out and sign 5 guys. It's sign 1 or 2 big guys a year.
Yeah. All right, Jordan, this was awesome. Thanks so much for doing this. Before you go, though, I need to ask one kind of big picture question here.
Okay.
I think the Giants have a very I think their flow is pretty low. Like their floor is pretty low. So I do think there's a scenario where they do win 4 or 5 games. Like
I agree.
Wise. But absolutely. I do think there's a ceiling where they can catch on and they can win 10 games. Like I don't think it's crazy to think that I think this
that's high.
I think there's a ceiling, but I think there's usually at least 1 or 2 teams a year that kind of just completely catches you off guard. Offense just catches fire. New head coach, like they catch lightning in a bottle.
Depends a lot. 8 or 9 would be a great season for this team. Their schedule gives them a chance to win some games.
Yeah,
I think that's really the thing there.
I'm going to stick with 10 games. I think there's a ceiling at 10 games here. Like I think they've got enough talent on the offensive side of the ball. If Daboll's as smart as everyone thinks he is, if he continues his Alabama play calling and a Buffalo play calling, if he continues to be as good as he was, I don't know. I might be crazy here, but I like what the Giants. I love what the Giants did this offseason. I love kind of their offensive style. Jordan, what's the most likely outcome you think for this team this year?
I think the most likely outcome is probably like 6 or 7, which is where Vegas kind of has. I think Vegas actually has them at 7. I've even seen 7.5, which is kind of high. But I think, like we said, that part of that is because of the schedule. And the reason I'm probably a little lower on the Giants than you are is because I have serious questions about depth at.
That's fair.
I mean, running back, they had nobody behind Saquon, and he's injured. He's been injury prone the last couple of years. They have nobody at tight end. Their offensive line, they are bare behind their starters. Cornerback is, I mean, they're in super trouble if anyone gets injured in secondary as a whole. So to me, like the depth part of it concerns because everybody gets injuries. This is the NFL.
Yeah.
So how do they survive? If some of these guys, these major players get injured, I don't know that they can. Mm-hmm. So that to me puts if I say 9, I'm really stretching. To me, like 8 is a really good season for this team.
That's funny. I'm looking at their depth chart and you're right. Like they got Matt Breida as a backup running back, their tight end.
And Matt Breida's already banged up, by the way. What's the knock on Matt Breida? He's been injured his whole career anyway.
Like Michael Jacquet is one of the backup cornerbacks. He was an Eagle. I watched him play in Philly. It wasn't.
I don't know who their second team. First of all, their second team like defense. The secondary every day changes.
Yeah,
but the guys that are out there, you're like, holy cow.
Yeah.
If any of these guys have to play, this team is screwed.
Yeah.
So that's what worries me. Yeah. Because I think you like you said, you can look at the starters and make case like, okay, this isn't they have some players, but. There's not the depth that the good teams have, and they know that. Like, trust me, Joe Schoen is well aware that the depth of this team is not what he would like it to be.
Jordan, this is awesome. Thanks so much for doing this. Before you go, why don't you plug in your social media and anywhere they can find your work? The listeners can find your work.
At Jordan Raanan on Twitter. That's Raanan. That's a lot of A's, a lot of vowels. I understand. And at Instagram, I'm at Jordan Raanan on ESPN. Same with like TikTok and all these other platforms. I don't know.
There you go. Jordan, man, enjoy the game tonight. Enjoy the season. Let's talk soon.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.